Hello, everybody. It's Friday. That means it's time for another topic of the week. So, first things first, happy 2019. Hey, it's great to be here. Last week's topic was, of course, on your hobby resolutions. I hope many people have started off the new year strong. If your resolution was to paint a whole bunch or something like that, I hope you've got to spend some time around the new year or at the holiday or something at the painting desk. It was certainly a popular place for me to hang out, and I'm happy with what I've got done so far. Hoping for a good year, so we'll see how it all turns out. Certainly, there's way too many things coming out this year that I want to paint. But that then brings us to this year's first topic of the week. And in thinking about the topic for this week, I mentioned on the show this last Wednesday that I really liked the second episode of Stormcast, which was an interview with Sam Pearson. And a lot of the ways he talked about game design was stuff I enjoyed. And he mentioned that he actually has more of a background in sort of narrative rules writing and, approaches things from a more narrative perspective. But, he has these sort of very strict understanding of, writing clean rules and stuff like that. And that got me thinking a lot about the nature of evocative rules. Evocative rules are something that is almost a combination of Melvin and Vorthos and Magic to a point. They are when a rule seems to be so clear that it couldn't be written any other way. It's so evocative. You read the header, okay, and like whatever it's called, insert name here. You read it, and you're like, I already know what this does, right? You get this sense of what it does, and then you read it and you're like, yes, that's exactly what I thought it did, right? So it's this sort of perfect harmony between like the monster, the creature that should have this rule. Like you look at the creature and you're like, yes, he would have a rule, he or she would have a rule like that, right? And then you read the name of the rule and you're like, yep, that's exactly what I would expect this creature to have, and I think it'll do this. And then you read the rule and you're like, yep, that's exactly how I thought it would work, or something cool I thought it would do. Perhaps a good example of this is the giants, like stuff them in the bag, stuff them in me bag, or whatever it's called, something like that. You look at the giant and the size of him versus normal things, and the way giants fight in movies, they're always like picking people up and eating them and biting their heads off and stuffing them in pockets and stuff or down their trousers. And I look at that, as soon as I read that rule, I was like, okay. And then you read the actual way it works, and you're like, yep. He has his chance, he rolls a die, picks up a model, puts him in his trousers, that model's dead. Because, as I always said, this has always been one of my favorite rules, because it is so evocative of, like, then there's the backside of this, that it's not just that the text and the name and the creature all align, but that the rule itself is evocative of something happening. There's a feeling you get, and I don't want to call it verisimilitude because I don't think it is. It isn't an alignment with the world as you expect it, really. It's more of just it's evocative of your imagination, and it gets sort of to the heart of the things that you love about your army or that force or the game itself, right? And Stuff 'Em in Me Bag was always one of those ones that read that way to me, because it's so funny to me of like some proud warrior getting picked up and shoved into a giant's bag. Like he showed up on the battlefield that day, ready to fight, like ready to go to work. He knew that this proud soldier might be facing the slavering forces of darkness, might be hurled against the demons of chaos or whatever, and instead he just gets stuffed in the bag of a giant. Not even necessarily killed. I mean, I understand it says he's slain for purposes of the game rules, but like, who knows what's going on in that bag? Doesn't die immediately, probably, which is probably worse. And I always just thought that was the funniest thing. Like, the nature of a giant and that rule and the way it works and the image it creates in my mind is so evocative. And there's plenty of rules in the game that aren't like this, right? There's plenty of rules in the game that aren't really, like, they serve there to be a very functional purpose. Functional rules writing. Like, you can give them the coolest name in the world. You know, you've got some murder obsessed unit and they have a rule that's called like, you know, bathed in blood or something, and it's like blah blah blah, they get +1 to hit. Some trigger +1 to hit. Okay. Cool. You know, nothing game state changing happened there that evoked a narrative, an image, a feeling in my head. I mean, like, it's so mechanically cold that it can be good. Like, I'm happy to see that rule on a unit I like, of course, because who doesn't want to be better at killing? Like, yes, I get it. This rule makes them better at killing. This is a unit about killing. This all aligns. I'm not saying it's a negative or causes some problem. I'm just saying that, like, it doesn't evoke the same feeling, the same imagination, the same love. You don't look at a creature, at a fun creature, and create that mental image based on the +1 to hit, because that's so amorphous to imagine what's really going on there in many cases. Not everyone. Some of these are actually quite, like, you can write that rule and it can happen to align in a good way, but then often it gets unusual. The Beast Lord's Grisly Trophy, where if the Beast Lord kills somebody, he holds up the head, and then the people immediately around him get to, like, you know, get significant bonuses. The gore immediately around him, as it were. Like, that makes sense. They're you know, empowered by the bestial fury of their lord, and like, okay, yeah, I get. There's a trigger thing that happened there that was evocative enough. So it's not like everything that just grants some bonus is by necessity cold and you know, unimaginative or unnarrative. But, by the way, I don't think every rule should or could be written like this. Some things need to just be mechanical, and that's okay. Sometimes units just need rules, and that's fine. But I have a special love in my heart of these evocative rules, right? Of things that when you read them, they do create the narrative just by their presence, you know, in your mind. And I think maybe my favorite, I do love the stuff in the bag thing. And there's a lot of contenders here, by the way. Oftentimes, like, Orcs and Goblins are pretty famous for this. They have a lot of rules that are this way. The Weird Knob Shaman, where if he has too many orcs around him and rolls, you know, a certain number, then his head kind of can explode. Classically, it literally exploded. More recently, it's mortal wounds, whatever. That's the kind of thing that again, there was this moment, you can picture the image, he's, too many orcs, boom, and, you know, okay. But I think I've got to give it to my favorite. And it's really a shame that this is my favorite, because it's in such a worthless force that like has no great purpose in the game right now. But it's such a great rule. And it's in Slaves to Darkness, and it's in their sort of allegiance ability, and it has to do with what happens when their general or their heroes do great deeds and then get to roll on sort of their dark rewards table. This is a classic of Warhammer. Like, this has existed, I don't know, maybe forever. I don't know when it got introduced, but I believe as long as I've been playing Warhammer, since the 90s, this has been a thing. That you could access this dark rewards table in some way. And, you know, versions of this show up in things like Mordheim and elsewhere. That's what I get for playing Ravenloft this weekend. And I've always loved the rule. So, you know, the dark rewards table is pretty obvious. The hero does something great. Usually it's kill somebody, and then they can, you know, seek a reward from the Chaos Gods. And you roll 2d6, and, you know, on most of it is just some kind of bonus. But on a 12, they ascend and become a Demon Prince. And on a 2, they are punished and become a Spawn. Right? And what I always loved about the rule was it did have a capricious nature, like it had a downside. What I enjoy about that rule, and have always about what it says, is it perfectly captures everything about Warhammer in one rule. Tells you everything you need to know about the setting. Because it explains the Chaos Gods. These are their greatest warriors, right? These are their champions. They're mortal beings who have dedicated their souls, who have literally damned themselves to fight for these, in the end, capricious deities, who can just as easily murder you and turn you into a spawn as they can grant you unbelievable power. Right? And the nature of everything they are, everything they represent, and everything that sort of sets Warhammer apart and makes it interesting, and the nature of the danger of magic and of chaos acting upon not only the enemies, just to say order or civilization or whatever, but even on their own people, is wrapped up in this one perfect rule. And you can picture the moment where, you know, the follower of this god calls out and the god is just displeased and spawned him. Suck it. So I always have loved that particular evocative rule. Shame, like I said, right now it happens to sit somewhere where basically no one's going to use it. But, say la vie. So that's my favorite evocative rule. And why, and I think evocative rules are good. I like when they're added into the game. Like I said, I don't want them to be everywhere. But I think it's always good when you can have that perfect alignment of the creature, what it is, what it represents to the world, sort of the name of the ability, how the ability works, and then the image it creates in your head. I think that in the end creates something that's memorable. And it moreover, it creates memorable moments. Like you remember in the game when your shaman used to blow his head off, or when your giant stuff's a really funny model in a bag, you know, or when or when your chaos lord, who, you know, you were winning a fight and then spawn. Oops. You know, it's just something that sticks. It automatically creates a flashpoint of memory, right? So those are mine. But what are yours? Do you have evocative rules? Do you like evocative rules? You know, do you like these kind of rules that have perhaps a bit more flavor? Maybe even so, oftentimes, you'll notice that a lot of these I've described have a big swinginess to them, like killing your own heroes or important other characters, right? They can do nothing or they can do a big something. Oftentimes that's how these rules shape out, but not always. Not always. That's just my Timmy nature happening that makes me love that stuff. But what's yours? Give a comment below. Tell me what you think about evocative rules and your favorites. As always, if you make a response video, I'll link that down below. But I thank you very much for watching this one, and as always, we'll see you next time.